The Billionaire's Daughter, a divorce trial that shook Manhattan. The expensive leather chairs creaked as wealthy spectators settled into the Manhattan courtroom. Jonathan Sterling lounged confidently beside his elite legal team, that self-satisfied smirk never leaving his face. He was convinced this divorce would be simple. Just another day of taking everything from his wife Emily while she stood there defenseless. After all, she was just some small-town girl who'd wandered into his life, completely alone in the big city with nobody to protect her. Victory seemed guaranteed. But Jonathan had made one catastrophic miscalculation. The instant those courthouse doors flew open and a convoy of black luxury vehicles rolled up to the curb, his entire world began to crumble. Jonathan wasn't simply divorcing some isolated housewife with nowhere to turn. He had just started a war with one of America's most powerful families, a dynasty whose existence he never suspected. And on this particular morning, they had arrived to settle the score. The dissolution of the Sterling marriage was unfolding in Manhattan's Superior Court, that imposing structure reeking of polished wood and the desperate ambitions of the privileged class. For Jonathan Sterling, that familiar scent spelled nothing but triumph. Jonathan straightened the sleeves of his custom-tailored European suit, stealing a glance at the designer timepiece wrapped around his wrist. He possessed that particular brand of attractiveness that predators have, polished, calculated, completely lacking in genuine warmth. At 40 years old, he controlled Sterling Innovations, a technology empire he'd constructed, though he conveniently erased the memory of his wife Emily's unwavering support during those difficult early years. Today, his mind wasn't dwelling on those countless late evenings when she helped him refine investor presentations, or how she'd cared for him through his stress-related health problems. Instead, his thoughts centered on Amanda, his 25-year-old marketing executive, currently awaiting his arrival at an upscale hotel downtown. He was also savoring the anticipation of completely destroying another person's life. "Take a good look at her," Jonathan murmured to his lead counsel, Marcus Blackwell. And Blackwell had earned his reputation in legal circles as the courtroom executioner because he didn't merely win his cases, he absolutely annihilated anyone standing in opposition. "She appears ready to collapse any second now. We'll wrap this up before the lunch hour." Marcus Blackwell produced a harsh, raspy chuckle. "Textbook scenario, Jonathan. We obliterate her confidence, she accepts our settlement terms and signs away any claim to alimony, then disappears back to whatever rural nowhere she crawled out from. Look at her legal representation. A court-appointed attorney for crying out loud. A public defender going up against my firm. This is almost too easy." On the opposite side of that courtroom aisle sat Emily Sterling, completely isolated. She had chosen a modest charcoal dress that had seen considerable wear, her chestnut hair secured in a tight, no-nonsense style. Exhaustion marked her features. Her hands rested clasped on the bare table before her. Seated at her side was a nervous young attorney named David Chen, a court-assigned lawyer who looked fresh out of law school, possibly having graduated just weeks earlier. He fumbled through his documents with visible anxiety, dropping his writing instrument, retrieving it, then dropping it once more. "Mrs. Sterling," David whispered, his voice breaking slightly, "I genuinely believe we should have accepted their original offer. $5,000 represents something rather than walking away with absolutely nothing. Blackwell has a terrifying reputation. He's planning to argue you made zero contributions to this marriage and will claim you were unfaithful to your husband." Emily kept her gaze fixed straight ahead at the judge's elevated bench. "I was never unfaithful, David. You understand that truth. Jonathan understands that truth." "Whether something is actually true doesn't determine the outcome," David hissed, panic creeping into his tone. "What matters is what they can demonstrate to the court, or what false evidence they can manufacture. They've produced photographs, Emily, possibly manipulated images, but photographs nonetheless. They've compiled testimony from household employees you've never even encountered. They're going to utterly demolish your credibility." Emily responded quietly. "Let them make the attempt." David stared at her in disbelief. For someone facing complete financial ruin and homelessness, she projected an eerily composed demeanor. This wasn't the calmness of acceptance. This was the deceptive stillness at a storm's center. Jonathan reclined in his chair, extending his legs comfortably. He caught Emily's eye and delivered a condescending smirk, silently mouthing a farewell. She didn't flinch or look away. She simply observed him, her expression dark and impossible to interpret. Judge Robert Thornton entered the chamber, his judicial robes flowing behind him. The bailiff commanded everyone to order. Judge Thornton had witnessed every imaginable courtroom drama, and he looked particularly uninterested this morning. Just another affluent husband discarding his first wife, a typical Tuesday morning in New York's court system. "We're convened to address the matter of Sterling versus Sterling," Judge Thornton announced in a monotone voice, adjusting his reading glasses. "Mr. Blackwell, you may deliver your opening remarks." Blackwell rose from his seat, fastening his jacket button. He didn't simply walk, he stalked with predatory grace. He positioned himself strategically, and though no jury occupied the box, he performed as though addressing a packed audience. "Your Honor," Blackwell commenced, his voice resonating with manufactured indignation, "we gather here this morning to terminate a marriage founded entirely on deception. My client, Mr. Jonathan Sterling, represents excellence in American entrepreneurship, a self-made individual who constructed a business empire through determination and integrity. And whom did he elevate alongside him during this journey?" He thrust an accusatory finger toward Emily like a loaded weapon. "This woman, Emily Sterling, someone who originated from an insignificant rural community in Wyoming, someone lacking formal education, lacking professional background, lacking any financial resources whatsoever. My client, demonstrating extraordinary generosity, chose to marry her despite these deficiencies. He provided her with an extravagant lifestyle, luxury penthouses, expensive vehicles, designer wardrobes. And how did she repay this incredible generosity?" Blackwell paused deliberately, allowing tension to build. The courtroom fell into absolute silence. She repaid him through laziness, through demonstrated incompetence, and ultimately through marital infidelity. A collective gasp rippled through the sparse crowd of observers, primarily journalists Jonathan had deliberately alerted to maximize Emily's public humiliation. "We possess substantial evidence, Your Honor," Blackwell continued, brandishing a substantial file folder. "Sworn statements from hotel personnel, financial receipts, documented proof. While my client dedicated 18-hour workdays to provide for this household, Mrs. Sterling was entertaining other men." Jonathan adopted an expression of profound suffering, studying his hands with apparent anguish. His performance deserved theatrical recognition. "We're requesting complete annulment of this marriage," Blackwell proclaimed. "We're demanding Mrs. Sterling receive 0 alimony payments. We're insisting she vacate the marital residence immediately. Furthermore, we're pursuing damages for defamation, citing the severe emotional trauma she has inflicted upon my client." David Chen looked physically ill. He struggled to his feet, his legs visibly trembling. "Objection, Your Honor. This presentation is absolutely absurd. Emily, Mrs. Sterling has demonstrated unwavering loyalty throughout 10 years of marriage." Judge Thornton released an exasperated sigh. "Resume your seat, Mr. Chen. You'll receive your opportunity to respond." Blackwell shot a triumphant glance at David. "The defense possesses nothing of substance, Your Honor, because the defendant herself is nothing of substance. She has no family members who can testify to her character, no credible witnesses, no financial resources. She's simply a con artist who finally got caught." Jonathan leaned toward Blackwell as he returned to his seat. "Absolutely masterful, Marcus. Genuinely brilliant work. Did you observe her reaction? She's completely paralyzed with fear." Blackwell whispered back confidently. "She's finished. We'll have signed documents within the hour. Then we're celebrating with lunch at that exclusive restaurant downtown." Emily sat motionless in her chair. She reached into her inexpensive handbag and extracted a small electronic pager, the old-fashioned type used in medical facilities or restaurants. It vibrated once with a harsh mechanical buzz. She glanced at the pager, then checked the wall clock. Precisely 10:30 in the morning. "Emily," David whispered urgently, "what is that device?" Emily finally turned to face her terrified attorney, as a small, enigmatic smile touched the corners of her mouth. "I informed Jonathan that I originated from a small Wyoming town. That statement was completely accurate. However, I never disclosed who actually controlled that town." David blinked in confusion. "What are you talking about?" "I told him my family situation was complicated and that we were estranged. That was true as well," Emily continued, her voice suddenly acquiring a steely strength. "What I didn't explain was that I left home because I wanted to discover whether anyone could genuinely love me for who I am, rather than for my family name." "Emily, you're not making any sense right now," David stammered. "He failed that test, David." Emily stood up without requesting permission. She simply rose, her entire posture transforming instantaneously. The defeated slump vanished completely. Her shoulders straightened. She appeared taller, sharper, genuinely dangerous. "Your Honor," Emily stated, her voice cutting cleanly through the courtroom murmurs. This wasn't the voice of a defeated housewife. This was the tone of someone accustomed to issuing commands that received immediate obedience. Judge Thornton peered over his glasses with annoyance. "Mrs. Sterling, your legal counsel will speak on your behalf." "My appointed counsel has performed admirably, considering the fabricated lies provided by the opposing side," Emily calmly interrupted. "However, my actual legal representation has just arrived. I'm requesting a brief recess to allow them entry into this building." Jonathan laughed openly and loudly. "Legal representation? What legal team could you possibly have? Did you recruit the grocery store cashier?" Blackwell rolled his eyes dismissively. "Your Honor, this represents an obvious stalling tactic. She possesses no resources whatsoever," Judge Thornton declared firmly while striking his gavel. "The recess request is denied. Sit down immediately, Mrs. Sterling." Boom! That sound wasn't thunder rolling through the building. It was the heavy double doors at the courtroom's rear being forced open with sufficient force to rattle the window frames. Every single head in the room turned simultaneously. The atmosphere transformed instantly, the air growing heavy and charged with sudden, overwhelming pressure. 6 men stood framed in the doorway. They weren't courthouse security personnel. They weren't local law enforcement officers. They wore black tactical clothing that was both impeccable and intimidating, with communication earpieces coiling down their necks. They moved with synchronized precision that revealed elite military training. They stepped aside in perfect unison, creating a pathway. Jonathan's expression shifted, his laughter dying immediately in his throat. "Who the hell are these people supposed to be?" Through that corridor of guards walked 2 individuals, a man and a woman. The man appeared to be in his mid-60s, yet possessed a vitality that made age seem irrelevant. He wore a charcoal suit worth more than Jonathan's luxury automobile. He had distinguished silver hair, piercing blue eyes, and carried a silver-topped walking cane, not from necessity, but because it resembled a weapon. The woman accompanying him appeared younger, strikingly beautiful, with sharp facial features that unmistakably mirrored Emily's. She wore a white power suit that looked like battle armor. She carried a leather briefcase stamped with a gold emblem, a lion gripping a sword in its claws. Following behind them marched a phalanx of attorneys, not the frantic, perspiring lawyers typically found in lower Manhattan courts. These were the predators that consumed other predators. 12 of them advanced in lockstep formation, carrying mountains of documentation. "What is the meaning of this interruption?" Judge Thornton demanded, though his voice wavered noticeably. "You cannot simply barge into my courtroom without proper authorization. The silver-haired man stopped at the center aisle. He looked at the judge, then at Jonathan. He didn't look at Jonathan like a fellow human being. He looked at him like something disgusting that needed removal. "My sincere apologies, Your Honor," the man stated. His voice was deep, smooth, and commanded absolute silence throughout the room. "We experienced delays due to your city's absolutely terrible traffic conditions. I am William Vandermeer." The silence that followed was absolutely complete. It was the type of silence that occurs when an explosive device has been dropped but hasn't yet detonated. Jonathan's face turned completely pale, and he recognized that name. Everyone in the business world recognized that name, Vandermeer. The Vandermeer family wasn't merely wealthy. They represented the foundation of American economic power. They owned steel manufacturing. They owned international shipping operations. They owned media conglomerates. Rumors suggested they owned half the United States Senate. They represented old money that existed before the nation had established borders. "William Vandermeer," Marcus Blackwell stuttered while struggling to his feet. "The industrialist?" The woman in the white suit stepped forward confidently. "And I am Victoria Vandermeer Hamilton, senior partner at Hamilton Cross and Associates." Blackwell choked on his words. Hamilton Cross and Associates represented the most feared law firm across the entire Western Hemisphere, and they handled international disputes, treaty negotiations, and divorces involving royalty. They didn't appear in superior court for technology executives. "We're here representing the defendant," William Vandermeer announced, turning his gaze toward Emily. His cold eyes softened immediately. "Hello, sweetheart." Emily stepped out from behind her table, walked past the stunned David Chen, and embraced the older man warmly. "Hi, Dad!" "Dad!" Jonathan shrieked. He stood up so violently his chair toppled backward. "That's completely impossible! She's Emily Johnson from Wyoming!" William Vandermeer released his daughter and turned slowly to confront Jonathan. The affectionate expression vanished entirely, replaced by glacial hatred. "She is Emily Vandermeer," William corrected, his voice dropping an octave lower. She used her mother's maiden name, Johnson, because she desired a simple existence. She wanted to find a man who loved her authentically, not her inheritance. She believed she had found that man in you. William took a deliberate step toward Jonathan. The bodyguards tensed, prepared to intercept, but William simply leaned on his cane. "We granted her 10 years, Mr. Sterling, 10 years to pursue an ordinary life. We maintained our distance as she requested. We allowed her to reside in your modest apartments. We allowed her to drive your average automobiles. However, then you made the decision to harm her." Victoria, Emily's sister, slammed her briefcase onto the defense table. The sound echoed like a gunshot blast. "You didn't simply file for divorce, Jonathan," Victoria stated while opening her case. You attempted to publicly humiliate her. You manufactured false evidence. You tried to leave a Vandermeer completely destitute. She extracted a document and held it high. "This is a motion to dismiss all your fraudulent claims," Victoria announced. "And this?" She produced a second, considerably thicker document. "This is our countersuit." "Countersuit?" Blackwell managed to squeak out. "On what possible grounds?" Victoria began listing charges while ticking off her fingers. Fraud, embezzlement, corporate espionage, adultery, and yes, conspiracy to defraud a federal judge. Jonathan felt the entire room spinning around him. "You're bluffing. Emily is nobody. She prepared my meals. She washed my clothing." "She washed your clothing," William said, his voice dripping with contempt, "because she genuinely loved you. And not because she had any obligation. You treated royalty like a servant, and you were too monumentally stupid to recognize the difference." Judge Thornton, finally grasping the situation's gravity, cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Vandermeer, while I respect your dramatic entrance, you cannot simply commandeer these proceedings. Mrs. Vandermeer Hamilton, you must file a formal appearance." "Already filed electronically, Your Honor. Approximately 4 minutes ago," Victoria replied smoothly. Along with our request to transfer this case to the High Court due to the substantial complexities of the assets involved. Assets? Jonathan scoffed, attempting to regain his composure. I'm the one controlling all the assets. She possesses nothing. Emily spoke then, her voice calm but carrying to every corner of the courtroom. Jonathan, she said, who exactly do you believe funded your initial seed investment for Sterling Innovations? Jonathan blinked repeatedly. Angel investors, a consortium called Vanguard Holdings. Vanguard, Emily repeated deliberately. V representing Vandermeer. My trust fund, Jonathan. I personally authorized that investment 10 years ago. I currently own 49% of your company. The courtroom erupted into absolute chaos. Jonathan collapsed back into his chair, his face now completely drained of color. The empire he thought he'd built alone had been funded by the woman he'd just tried to destroy, and her family had arrived to collect everything he owed.